What's going on? Welcome to Tech with Sean. Today we're taking a look at the Acer Nitro 5 gaming laptop. The one we have, they have a bunch of different models available. The one we picked up has the i5-8300H, 8 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, and a 256 gigabyte hard drive. And this model has a GTX 1050 Ti GPU. They have a bunch of different models available. Some have a 1050, some have a 1050 Ti. Some have a SSD, some have a mechanical hard drive, but this is the one that was available at our brick and mortar Best Buy. I think it usually retails for $7.99, and we actually got a Black Friday deal on it, so it was only $5.99. And for that price point, it's pretty hard to beat this for an entry-level gaming laptop, I think. So let's take a look at it. We're going to do a hard drive upgrade. We're going to add a 500 gig SSD for extra game storage. And we'll take a look at some tweaks, some things that you can do to increase performance a little bit. I'll show you what I did to enhance the color on the monitor, and I'll show you how to put a slight overclock on the graphics card. So the fit and finish on the Nitro 5 is budget, but high-end budget. You have the red LED keyboard, the IPS screen. It is a plastic chassis. There's a brushed finish on it. It is kind of a fingerprint magnet. Has some really good I/O. You have a standard network port, USB-C, Kensington lock, HDMI, USB 3, SD reader, power, headphone, and microphone port, and 2 regular USB 2 ports. So no matter what port you need, it's probably got it. I like that it has the SD and the HDMI. Those are pretty handy for me. The model we picked up came equipped with an i5-8300H. That's an 8th core i5 chip, and that's a 4-core 8-thread chip. So unlike the desktop 8th gen i5, which is 6-core 6-thread, this has hyper-threading, and it's a 4-core 8-thread. It's really kind of like the successor to the 7700HQ Kaby Lake mobile chip. This does outperform it though. It in benchmarks, you can look it up. I think it typically does like 5 to 15% better than a 7700 HQ, and I think it's a little more power efficient. This came with 8 gigs of DDR4 memory, and that's 1 DIMM, so there's 1 open slot. It's easily accessible, so if you wanted to replace it in the future, you could just drop 1 more stick in there, or whatever you wanted to do. The model we picked up is equipped with a 256 gig NVMe SSD. There are options to get a 1 terabyte mechanical drive also, but there is an expansion bay on the bottom for a 2.5-inch SATA drive, so you can put in basically anything you want. Today we're going to drop in a 500 gig Samsung Evo SSD, so we'll basically triple the storage. And it's all going to be really fast solid state storage, so we're not going to be sitting there waiting for your 5400 RPM laptop drive to load up games. Okay, so here on the Acer Nitro 5, the panel, the IPS panel out of the box, it looked to me was a little dull and a little bluish and green in tint. So I wanted to show you a couple of tweaks that I did that I believe helped a lot. So if you come down here to the taskbar, one of the preloaded apps you'll find is this Intel graphics settings. So you want to open that. And then over here on display, you come to color settings. And now I bumped the saturation up to 10. And up here on the red, I moved it to -1. Seems weird, but I don't know. I think it did the best for me. I used this in combination with the Windows 10 color calibration, and I'll show you that here in just a second also. But having this saturation bumped up here is key, because I don't know that there's a way you can change that in Windows itself. And the panel does look a bit dull before you do that. So down here I just typed in, I believe, calibration, and Calibrate display color pops up. So you want to do this, you run next. Now these settings are going to vary a little bit from panel to panel. I'm just going to show you what I do for this one and just do what works best for yours if you want to follow along. So for mine to look the best on the gamma, I move the slider up just a tad. The brightness and contrast, the brightness kind of depends on the environment. You may want one setting for indoors, one for outdoors, and you can easily adjust that at any time with the function and the up and down arrow, or the left and right arrows on the keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. Now this is the color balance. This is the more important part. And so this specific panel, to me, has a kind of green tint to it. So what I did was drop this by 2 clicks, and then I dropped this by a click. I'm going to unclick this text thing because y'all don't want to watch that. But basically, doing that color calibration in combination with bumping up the saturation in the Intel graphics thing made a huge difference in the panel. The reds are still a little bit weak, but if you manually bump the reds up in that one thing, it kind of throws off the blacks and everything else. So I think this is about the best. The brightness is really nice. I don't have any professional tools, but someone measured this on another video I watched, and they said it got up over 400 nits. And that's really good for a budget laptop. I do recommend installing Throttle Stop. It's an application that lets you undervolt your CPU and change some things. Thermals are pretty much an issue in all laptops that are for gaming. This has an i5 instead of an i7 and the 1050 Ti, so those are both a little better than some of the more high-end pieces that have lower TDP. There's less heat to disperse in the first place, but it doesn't hurt to give it a little help. I came in here and gave it a minus 142.6 millivolt offset on the CPU core, and then over here I dropped the 4-core boost by a couple hundred megahertz, and I think I dropped each of these by just like 100 megahertz or something, so won't make any huge impact, but when you're running at those top clock speeds, especially like on all the cores, dropping it a couple hundred megahertz will help a little bit with the thermals. I'm also running a little bit of an overclock on the 1050 Ti, which you can totally get away with. Right now I just have 125 megahertz boost added to the core clock, and then I have 225 megahertz on the memory. It's not huge, but you know, it's a little boost, and it helps when you have that 1050 Ti. So this is running for all of the gaming stuff we're going to show. Okay, before we get into the hard drive upgrade, I was just going to load up a couple of games and give you kind of an idea of what the performance is like on this thing. It's a 1050 Ti, so you have to keep your expectations in check, but you know, by just adjusting a couple of settings, you can have a really, really good experience at 1080p, and if something's really demanding, lowering it to 1600 by 900 will let you keep some respectable looking settings and give you a higher resolution picture than if you had to drop it to 720p. That's not the case with Forza Horizon 4. This is one of the games I've been playing the most lately on PC. And this is really well optimized. I think that maybe because it has roots as a console game, who knows, but with just some settings optimization, I have had a really good experience with this. So right now I'm running 1920 by 1080, 60 frames per second, VSync. I'm showing the FPS. So I have the AF on Ultra, night shadows are off. High quality shadows, high quality textures, high, 2 times multi-sample anti-aliasing. Even on the 1050 Ti, we're able to pull this off. We have the ambient occlusion and reflections on medium. Those actually do have a little bit of perceptible impact. A lot of these settings don't make a whole bunch of impact. World car level of detail, this will make a huge difference. If you put it up past this, you need a better graphics card. And screen space reflections, medium, all this other stuff is on high. So let's just jump into it. This is loaded on the included 256 gig SSD, and it's not too bad, it's pretty quick.
Welcome back, rookie.
So I find that this is a really good experience on here at 60 frames per second. I think it is even better maybe than the 1080p mode on the Xbox One X. I could be wrong. If I am, I'm sure someone will correct me. But when you get going, it runs really well. This game has a built-in frame counter. So up there in the right hand corner, you can see we're getting a solid 60 frames per second. And right now we're using about, it looks like between 60 and 75% of the GPU. So even the 1050 Ti, it's pulling 60 frames here and it's not maxed out. It will drop occasionally. I've seen it drop to like 55 frames per second at the beginning of a race when you have like all 8 or 12 cars or whatever lined up together. I think that's just because there's a lot more reflections and things going on. But like as soon as the race starts, whoa, I can't talk and drive at the same time, just like real life. But yeah, once the race gets going, after like the first 10 seconds when everyone's not in a big group, then it's basically solid 60 frames all the time from what I've seen. This is a really fun game too. If you haven't gotten it, check it out. I'm sure it's going to be running on sale throughout the holiday season. Okay, here we are playing some Grand Theft Auto 5, and it's no problem at all for this thing. I'll show you what settings I have it running at. We got DirectX 11, 1080p, 60 frames per second, 2 times MSAA, TXAA on, whatever that is. It's an NVIDIA chip. I don't think it's very high impact. VSync on, blah blah blah. Have these up very high. Have shadows on high. Reflection, anti-aliasing is off. You want the 16 times AF. But yeah, it's pretty high settings for a mobile graphics card of this caliber. But this game does not care. It runs really well. This is a pretty well optimized game. I haven't tried it, but if you wanted to, you may even be able to bump up some resolution scaling or turn up some of the shadows or the things I had turned down. I'm just pretty happy with this experience that I had messing with it at these settings. It looks really nice too. Okay, next we're taking a look at Far Cry 5. Now this is a more demanding game than the other two, and this will even tax a high-end rig today if you're playing at the highest settings. So we have this set to 1600 by 900. This is a step down from the 1080p, but it's a noticeably better picture than if you went all the way to 720p, which is the next like standard resolution. This is kind of similar to what like Xbox One does. A lot of its games play at 900p just because of system limitations and whatnot. But it's a good workaround and definitely crisper than dropping to 720. Next we have the video settings. We have most of these on a mix of everything. A lot of normal. Texture filtering isn't a real high impact setting, so you might as well put that on ultra. We have normal, environment is on high, just some little extra flourishes. Water on normal, terrain on high. You look at the terrain a lot, you know, might as well have that looking nice. The fog, this one's kind of a pretty impactful one on a lower end GPU, so I have that set to low. HD textures I have set to off. There's only 4 gig VRAM. We're only playing at 1080p. Just not worth it for me. And then I'm using TAA because since we are running a little lower resolution, might as well have some anti-aliasing to kind of smooth things out. I do play with VSync on. I'll turn that off for the benchmark though. And have a resolution scale at 1. You can always drop that down too, and that will basically just you know, increase performance the lower you go, and it will drop the resolution accordingly. So let's take a look and see what it does. I have this installed on a mechanical drive, a 5400 RPM drive, so it's slow as balls. We're going to be replacing that with the SSD. Okay, so as you can see on the screen here, we have our minimum FPS. It dropped down to 54. It averaged over 60 though. It's very playable. And that's running at 900p, and that's still, you know, a very good mobile gaming experience, I would say. It's not going to replace your desktop, but for its price range, it's hard to beat. Okay, so let's get into this hard drive upgrade. I'm just going to use the included little case to set it on so I don't scratch it up. Okay, so we're looking here at the bottom of the laptop. Over here, there's a small door. And if you were upgrading the memory modules, you just pop that out, stick in a new one, you're good to go. The door we're going for is right over here. This is the hard drive bay. It just has a single screw holding it in. So you just loosen that, pop that right out. I already have a drive in here that I just was messing around with. It's a mechanical drive. So this little caddy just has 4 small screws. They're very small. Make sure you don't lose them. They're a real specific size, and it's probably going to be a huge pain to try to replace. Okay, with those screws out, you can go ahead and lift the drive up. Now, the first time you do this, you're not going to probably have a drive in there, and so this is just going to be empty. It's just kind of like a little sleeve. And the computer itself will come with a package that has these small screws in it. I've just already installed a drive on here. So that's the mechanical drive we're taking out. And this is just the little sleeve thingy. It just sits in here. So we're about to load up our Samsung SD. And so we're going to go ahead and mount it up just like we would the other one. You want to take a look at your connector here. It's going to have a short side and a wide side. And you want to make sure that you mount your drive so that it can connect properly. So typically you put the bottom side, the sensitive side, I guess, if it were a mechanical drive, towards the film. And if you're doing this new, take your little hard drive mounting screws out of the package in the motherboard box and use them to attach your new drive to this caddy. Okay, once you have your new drive mounted, just go ahead and drop it in here. This side that sticks up goes in the top left corner. Actually, I'm dumb. Once you have your drive mounted, go ahead and connect it to your SATA connector. It just pops right on. Set the cable in there nicely. Be delicate, you don't want to mess up that cable. And then just plop your drive back down in there. You're gonna reapply your 4 small screws. You don't need to over tighten these. They're very delicate, and you don't want to strip the screws out, so just be mindful of that. Okay, once you have your SSD in, we're going to go ahead and put this in here. You can see these little tabs. It has to go in kind of at an angle, and just play with it and it'll go in. Then we're just going to replace our screw and the process is done. Voila, that was an easy upgrade. Okay, our drive doesn't show up in Explorer, so we're going to go ahead and open Disk Management. If you just type in disk, this create and format hard drive partitions will pop up. And this is giving me a prompt to go ahead and initialize the disk. I'm going to choose the MBR, Master Boot Record. That's just kind of like the more standard kind of format. So this is showing that the whole volume is unallocated. So on here we're going to go right click it and create a new simple volume. Just hit next, next. We're going to call it Drive D. We're going to have it do NTFS. That's the standard Windows file system. And it's brand new, so I'm just going to leave quick format checked. Boom. So now we have our 500 gig SSD showing up. So that was a look at the Acer Nitro 5 gaming laptop. We're pretty happy with the performance and what you get for the price. If you all picked one up or if you are getting one this holiday season, I'm sure you'll be happy with it too. Let us know in the comments, what are you playing on it? And if you haven't, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.